Alright folks, how you doing? Welcome back to the Mars Mystery. Disclaimer, under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. So this is Hidden Things, the Feathered Serpent, the Firebird, and the Stone, Part 1. Hancock writes, Hugh Harleston's calculations of the mysterious Mexican city of Teotihuacan eventually led him to the theory that the site could inscribe a vast astronomical map in which the distances between major structures stand in relation to the distances between the planets. Harleston also developed an astronomical reading of an ancient Mexican myth, the Ziapzalotl, the twin brother of Quetzalcoatl, often symbolized as a fiery feathered serpent. Both Ziapzalotl and Quetzalcoatl are spoken of as having been skinned alive. The flaying of sacrificial victims was a standard practice among the Aztecs. Harleston's reading sees the symbolism of Quetzalcoatl as referring to a flayed planet, the twin to Mars, whose surface is conceived to have been deliberately peeled off like an orange. According to this reading, the damaged twin companion, the flayed red god of the east, or Mars. Hancock goes on to point out that the northern hemisphere of Mars appears to have been flayed or peeled away, and that the planet, quote, bears the scars of a cataclysmic bombardment. Hancock wonders if the Ziapzalotl myth is a retelling of the Martian catastrophe, quote, involving the red god of the east, Mars, having his skin flayed by a fiery serpent. If so, then we are obliged to ask what entity could fit the description of a fiery, feathered serpent flying across the heavens with vivid plumes behind it. Donati's comet of 1858 was described in the following terms. It had the head of a serpent, its body near the nucleus twisted and turned like a gigantic red serpent. Were such an object to strike, it would cause unimaginable devastation, perhaps enough to flay its victim. Astronomical cycles. So Hancock now turns to Indian mythology, which is exactly where to look. Quote, in Indian myth, Vishnu lies sleeping on the cosmic ocean, wrapped in the coils of the Naga serpent Ananda. From out of Vishnu's navel a lotus arises on which is seated the creator Brahma. On each day he opens and closes his eyes 1,000 times. When he opens them, a world comes into being. When he closes them, a world comes to an end. Hancock elaborates, quote, each cycle of coming in and out of existence is itself subdivided into 4 stages, called yugas, the Krita Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Dvapara Yuga, and finally the Kali Yuga. The astronomical aspects of the Yuga is that in its commencement, the sun, moon, and planets stood in conjunction and returned to the same point at the end of the age. The archaic marker for the end of an epoch is an astronomical one, an actual event in historical time, denominated in terms of the precession of the equinoxes. This is the cyclical process which slowly shifts the zodiacal constellations against the background of which the sun rises on the spring equinox. Sun and stars were said to return to starting points along the ecliptic, and the cycle begins again once every 25,920 years. Hancock points out that this isn't exclusive to India, this is actually universal. Quote, all around the world, it was understood that the end of each cosmic epoch would be brought about by a cataclysm and followed by the birth of a new age. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? Periodic destructions. So Hancock states that according to the Hopi, the first world was destroyed as a punishment by fire. The second world was seemingly destroyed by a pole shift followed by an ice age. The third world was destroyed by a global flood. Quote, the present world is the fourth. Its fate will depend on whether or not its inhabitants behave in accordance with the Creator's plans. Well, I guess we're fucked then, because not only are we engaged in degeneracy, which the Creator would not approve of, we even celebrate it and promote it. So, yeah, we're fucked. Quote, in Aztec and Mayan mythology, we are living in the fifth epoch of creation. The fourth epoch was brought to an end by a great flood. It was prophesied that the fate of the fifth epoch will end in a cataclysmic, quote, movement of the earth. Ancient Egypt also preserved complex beliefs concerning the cyclic creation and destruction of worlds. The little-known Edfu building texts speak of a remote golden age when the gods lived on an island destroyed in a terrible storm caused by a great serpent. In other words, the fall of Atlantis when it was hit by a comet, presumably. Hancock writes that most of the divine inhabitants drowned, but the survivors settled in ancient Egypt, quote, where they became known as the builder gods who fashioned the primeval time, the lords of light. He continues, quote, it was these survivors who set out the foundations of all the future pyramids and temples of Egypt, and who handed down the religion that would later be practiced under the semi-divine rule of the pharaohs. Is he referring to Freemasonry or proto-Freemasonry? I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, one of the most Masonic cities in the world is Edinburgh, which, by the way, is where Graham Hancock originally comes from. And the image on the top right is the inscription above Edinburgh Central Library, "Let there be light." And down on the bottom is an artist's depiction of ancient Egypt, though I think it should be more fertile than that, but, well, I suppose it's close enough, really. The Benben of Heliopolis. So, quote, the religious system practiced at the pyramids was administered by the nearby sacred city of Heliopolis and had as its central icon a pyramidal stone called the Benben, which was made of Bajam metal, literally metal from heaven. There seems little doubt that this object, which was venerated in a special temple called Het Benbenet, literally mansion of the phoenix, was a fragment of meteorite, which you can see on the top right. On the bottom right, there is a scene from Star Trek Enterprise where Captain Archer is on Vulcan, aka Mars, carrying exactly that, or what appears to be that, in some kind of adaptation of it, I suppose. The Kinshara, I think they call it, or the Kershara, something like that. But yeah, I mean, Vulcan in Star Trek is essentially just Mars. And if you're wondering who the Martians were or are, well, who conceived Star Trek? Who wrote it? Who produced it? Who starred in it? It's not me telling you, they told you themselves. I'm simply pointing out what's already there. Hancock states that there are two types of meteorite, stone and iron. Quote, the iron tend to be black and often larger than the stone variety, since they suffer little or no damage when they hit soft ground. Also, when entering Earth's atmosphere, some iron meteorites retain their direction of flight, like an arrow, or artillery shells. Many religious cults that venerated sacred meteorites existed in the ancient world. The cult at Delphi had a meteoritic origin. Meteoritic? I don't know if that was a word, but anyway. Hancock states that meteor cults were prevalent in Phoenicia and Syria. Quote, the sacred black stone of the Kaaba in Mecca is believed to be a meteorite. In ancient Phrygia, the great mother of the god Cybele was represented at the temple of Pessinus by a black stone fallen from the sky. Sir E. A. Wallace Budge was the first scholar to suggest that the Benben stone of the ancient Egyptians must have belonged to this class of objects. Hancock states that his own research convinced him that an iron meteorite fell near Giza in the first half of the 3rd millennium BC. Quote, from the depictions of the Benben stone, the frightful spectacle of its fiery fall would have been impressive. The fall would have been presaged by loud detonations caused by shock waves, and even in daylight, a fireball with a long plumed tail would have been visible from far away. People would have seen that the firebird had disappeared, leaving only a black cosmic egg. So that wraps it up for part 1. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts and comments down below. And take care.